So, Jono, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the subject of Aliyah, the biblical perspective. What is the biblical basis for Aliyah? What does the word mean? It is a Hebrew word. I think many of our viewers know this. What does it mean? Where do we find the basis for it biblically? What happened in the 19th century? I think towards the end of the 19th century, you have a very special, interesting theory that I'd like to get into. And then the other thing I'd like to do is to bring up the question, should the people of Israel who are in the dispersion, not just in the U.S. and Australia where we live, but throughout Europe and all these other countries, should they be, especially based upon the drastic rise of anti-Semitism, particularly since October the 7th, should they be looking for, like Dave mentioned earlier, a way to get back to the land? I mean, that's kind of what I want to cover. And then one other thing, and then I'd also like to talk a little bit about current events that are going on right now as we are making this video. What's going on in the world? We've even got another country that's jumped in to the fray and declared war on Israel. So we're going to talk about that as well.
Right. Yeah. I just want to begin by saying that I'm not, the history and politics is not my forte, but we really felt like we couldn't go anywhere else in as far as the topic was concerned for tonight, considering world events and what's going on. It wasn't time to go back and do a biblical topic, although Aliyah is a biblical topic. We are going to tie this in, obviously. But I do want to go back to before what is called the first Aliyah and what happened in the world that made it possible. And there is actually a period, Ross, called the Jewish emancipation. And the Jewish emancipation began in the late 1700s and went through to the late 1800s, about a century worth of emancipation. And this period in time was mostly throughout Europe, European countries easing, if you like, discriminatory law against the Jews. Traditionally, in a lot of these countries, Jews were kept to ghettos. Their movements were restricted. The jobs that they could seek and services they could perform, and so on and so forth, everything was really quite difficult for them. And over the period of about a century, that eased, and in various countries, which enabled, Ross, opportunities for travel. Yeah. And with those opportunities to, get out of the ghettos and to be treated almost with, in some cases, full citizen rights, many decided to return to Israel, what was then known as, of course, Palestine. And in that, we know of now. Dave already mentioned, that he's working with Christian organizations as well, and why not? Anybody who is on the side of Israel, and Christian Zionism is a very big part.
We've talked about that a lot too. We really have. I mean,
we've talked about it.
Credit where credit's due. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this, and I mentioned that because I'm just going to touch on it in a minute, but the period of Jewish emancipation culminated into Jewish groups talking about returning to the land, cultivating the land, agriculture and so forth, and making Palestine the homeland once again. So that started, most sources will tell you that it started in 1882, 1883, 1882, I think. And there are reasons for that, but I'm going to say that it really started in 1878. And the reason why I cite that year is because places like Petah Tikva and Rosh Pinah were actually established in that year, and they were established by Jews, particularly Petah Tikva were established by European Jews that came over specifically to start a community and develop the land and deal with the swamps and so on and so forth. Now, before that happened, or around that time, there were also pioneers in the diaspora, not just Jewish pioneers, but Christian Zionists, if you like. People, and I'm thinking of people like Charles Taze Russell. These are he was a I guess now we have Jehovah's Witnesses, but the Russellites.
But they deviated from his.
They did deviate. That's right.
Clearly, yeah.
He wouldn't approve. But
that's right.
But Charles Taze Russell, as a result of his theology, really did believe that now was the time for the Jews to go back and reclaim their homeland. And it might not be theology that we entirely agree with, but it was interesting in that he was, like John Hagee of today, a dual covenant theologist, and that is to say that he didn't believe in trying to convert the Jews. The Jews have a covenant with God, and he believed Christians have a covenant through the New Testament, of course.
We have, let me just jump in, Jonah. We have, United Israel has a book by David Horowitz, the founder of United Israel, and the dean of the United Nations Correspondence Association, to kind of springboard off of Ralph Bunton's book. But there is a book by David Horowitz called Charles Taze Russell, an early American Zionist. And it's a fantastic read. It's one of the books that I read this week because I was interested in not only Jewish teachers and people who pushed us into what is called modern Zionism, but I was also interested in this evangelical approach. So didn't mean to cut you off, but I got excited. You mentioned Charles Taze Russell. We didn't talk about this.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I read. And let me add one more thing about Charles Taze Russell. He spoke before a massive audience in New York because, and he encouraged Jews to make Aliyah, to go back to the land. And they trusted him. We have evidence of this because of exchanges, letters that were written between Charles Taze Russell and the Jewish leaders of the time in New York City. They trusted him because they knew he wasn't, to your point, trying to evangelize them. He didn't have this idea that you should go back to the land because Jesus won't come until all the Jews are. There's none of that. What he was looking at was prophecy after prophecy after prophecy that said the Jewish people, the people of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are going to go back to the land that God gave their fathers. So good Zionist man.
Yeah, absolutely good Christian Zionist, and one of the pioneers of Christian Zionism, if you like. Again, theology that maybe you and I might not agree with entirely, but certainly springboarding off the New Testament and trying to make it all fit. But he was a student of the entire Christian Bible, which includes the Hebrew Bible, and he taught that as early as 1879, that God's favor had been restored to the Jews. This is really interesting, as a result of a prophetic double which had ended in 1878. So his understanding was that God's favor from Jacob to Jesus and then disfavor from Jesus until 1878. Why 1878? I'm sure he has some sort of prophetic math going on there. And I'm thinking, I'm not
going to say it, but go ahead. I'm not going to interrupt him, but I know something that happened.
It's an interesting year, 1878. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But to your point, in 1910, he conducted a meeting at the New York Hippodrome Theater with thousands of Jews in attendance. Thousands of Jews, Ross. And he did present his case that they needed to return and reclaim their homeland. Now, around this time, I'm just trying to remember, when exactly did the Dreyfus Affair occur? This is in
I
France.
don't know the date. Yeah, I don't know the date. I don't have it
This
in
is
front of me.
Yeah. So I think that this is around the turn of the century. I do believe, and this began, I think, just before. It might have been. Hang on, the scandal began. Okay, I've got this open here. The scandal began December 1894.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
people, if you don't know much about this, and I don't, if you don't know much about the Dreyfus affair in France, then it's worth reading about, because here is a case where a Jewish man was used as a scapegoat, clearly innocent, and condemned as guilty purely because he was Jewish. It's an alarming read. And one person who kept their finger on the pulse of this event, of course, was Theodor Herzl. Now, Theodor Herzl then, as a result of this, realized the cycle of anti-Semitism and the predicament that Jews found themselves in the diaspora, and was absolutely convinced of the need of a Jewish homeland, and came up with his paper on Zionism. Ross, do you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, I can touch it. He did ultimately wrote several things, but one of the things that he produced is called Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, and it was basically this idea, a manifesto, if you will, on how to practically bring about a Jewish homeland in Palestine, in the land that God gave to the fathers. And it really, the whole story is fascinating, and people can get copies of Der Judenstaat in English, obviously, and read that. And I think it should be required reading for anyone who is inclined or oriented towards a Hebrew faith. And a lot of times when we go on the Tanakh tour, one of the things that we tell people is we're going to bring you to places that are found in the text, where the stories of the Bible can come to life. But all along the way, we introduce people to the miracle that is the modern state of Israel. And that is brought about in great part, by people such as those who were the early Zionists, whether it's talking about Charles Taze Russell or Theodor Herzl or any number of other folks. But yeah, I would highly recommend Der Judenstaat, because a lot of the criticism by those who look at Theodor Herzl, and there are some even Orthodox Jewish groups who don't think very positive. They don't think that the modern state of Israel has anything to do with biblical fulfillment, because Theodor Herzl, they would point at some of the early Zionists and they would say they're not even religious.
He's not religious enough for them, yeah. So
yeah, that's right. You're not wearing the right costume and so forth.
So he published that in 1896, I do believe, and he had a short life. I think he died at the age of 44, and it's remarkable what he accomplished in that time. And we visited his grave last time we were in Israel, I do believe, as I recall.
That's right.
So Herzl, and so again, off the bat of Herzl, a great motivation to make Aliyah, the movement grew, and Jews started to consider this, especially in light of what was happening in their own backyard. So the question then becomes, well, what was happening in their own backyard? And for the first Aliyah, like I said, I would say that it really does kick off in 1878. The reason why I say that is because I mentioned Petah Tikva. The land for Petah Tikva was purchased by Jews of the diaspora, European Jews, from, I do believe, Arab Christians. There were 2 plots of land, and the first of which was purchased, I think, was it June or July of, I'm grabbing your book here, because I know that your book begins, the first words on here is,
While you're looking that up, I want to make
July.
one point. You're going much more into the birth of Zionism, which is good. It's a good refresher.
Mm.
One thing that I would add, though, is that when the Jews, a lot of times people will present the case against Zionism, against Jews living in the land of Israel, by saying that they stole the land. Not only did they not steal the land, they paid premium dollar for everything they got. They
Yeah.
were overcharged, if anything, and quite often they were sold land that no one else wanted. It's
Didn't want it.
marsh. It's
It was.
filled
It was
with
swamp,
it's horrible.
and they had
Yeah.
to deal with malaria, and they had to clear the land and the waterways and all that sort of stuff, so that the water would flow to reduce the malaria, so that they could continue to work the land and gain produce from it. So that
Yeah.
first plot of land that no one really wanted was purchased in July of 1878. Now, I reach for your book and look for the first words that are mentioned there, because that's the way that your book begins. In July of 1878. It just so happens, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but it just so happens this is why your book begins, because this is the month and the year where Moses Shapira acquires those leather strips that we now know as the Moses Scroll. We'll talk about that in just a little while. But the first
So
Aliyah,
wait. Before you go further, so you're making a connection that we'll come back to shortly, and we've got a lot to cover. But you're saying that July of 1878, when Shapira acquires the manuscript, it happens to be the same month.
Exactly the same month.
Okay.
The land is being purchased by Jews of the diaspora to purchase land in Israel, which became known as
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's why I say, and they came through in small numbers to begin with, but they were coming from the diaspora, and they were establishing and attempting to establish communities, and that started in July of 1878 with the purchase of one of the two blocks of land, parcels of land that became known as that.
Now let me jump in, Jono, just because, and I don't want to steal. We don't rehearse, so I don't know what all you're going to cover. But I did want to say, on my website rossknichols.com, I have a section called Ross's Recommended Reading. This book is called The Routledge Atlas of the Arab-Israeli Conflict by Martin Gilbert, the 10th edition. And it's filled with maps. You can't see that, I know, but you can make out the map. And then there's comments all around the map. It's so if you want to know, you want to learn the history, you're going to see that this is not biased, really. It's facts, it's maps, and it shows it on the map. It's very helpful. The reason I bring it up now and interrupt is because one of the things that it says in like one of the early maps, first of all, let me let you know this. There are 4 cities in Israel, 4 holy cities that have been maintained a big Jewish presence even since biblical times. And that's Tzfat or Safed in the north, Tiberias, Jerusalem, and Hebron, those 4 cities. So, like, they have never been without a large Jewish presence. I wanted to add this. You mentioned 1878. By 1880, the census there shows that there are Jews form the majority in Jerusalem. So this myth, the myth that Jews just kind of came in and stole all the land, that they were outsiders, that they're Europeans, that they're not even natives to the land, all of this stuff is propaganda, it's lies. And I wanted to say that this floodgate that does open, it's like a call goes forth where more and more Jews feel the timing is right. Maybe some prophetic time marker is passed. Between 1880 and 1914, more than 60,000 Jews begin to make their way into the land of Israel. So that's a major. So it's like in 1878, something happens, and people just come in. You're right.
That's right.
I didn't mean to. I just wanted to make sure we covered that.
Now, just to give an example of that, of what you just said, off the back of this century of Jewish emancipation, the Yemenite Jews begin to come in 1881. Quite a number of them, but that increased a lot with, impressively, with the opening of the Suez Canal, which made travel between Yemen and Israel so much easier. And they really saw, the Yemenite Jews saw this and really believed, to your point, that this was an indication of the coming Messianic era, and they wanted to be a part of it. And so many of them left and went to Israel. There really was a buzz around this time, and the first wave of Aliyah went from 1881 to 1903, and a lot of Jews did make it in. The second wave, the reason why there was a second wave of Aliyah from 1904 to 1914 was that there was growing anti-Semitism, right? In Russia, particularly, and off the back of some fairly vicious pogroms, Jews left, and particularly in Eastern Europe, got out of there, went to Israel. And this is kind of a theme for every wave of Aliyah that came afterwards. The third Aliyah, there was another, the Russian Revolution, Russian Civil War, led to a wave of pogroms. An estimated 100,000 Jews, Ross, were killed, and 500,000 left homeless. And what are they going to do? So there was a wave of Aliyah. The fourth wave of Aliyah was between, I think, let me see here, started around 1924. And the reason for this, again, was anti-Semitism around Europe, growing anti-Semitism, and it pushed Jews to reconsider and look for alternatives. Now, a lot of, if not perhaps more, Jews went to the US. This is why you have such a massive...
certainly.
Yeah. And the reason was a more secure economic opportunity. So those who braved going to Israel were really, they really were very courageous, determined to make it work, and were filled with a sense of patriotism. Now, that's not to say that those that went to the States didn't have that, but the States certainly represented more economic opportunity at the time, more security in that regard. The fifth wave of Aliyah, and this was 1929 to 1939. Well, needless to say, the rise to power of Hitler and the Nazi Party really caused great concern to Jews in Germany and Eastern Europe. And again, this sort of threat motivated a wave of Aliyah. After that, Aliyah Bet, known as the illegal immigration, 1933 to 1948. And why was it the illegal immigration? It's because British Palestine, the Brits tried to prevent Jews from coming, even knowing what was going on in Germany. The States did as well. The States restricted immigration of Jews during that time. And it's as if it looks from a distance like they just thought, well, I'll let people make up their mind about that, and people who have read the history.
Let me jump in. You bring it. It's a perfect segue, because if you trace the Aliyah, the various waves as you're doing, this will be restreamed tomorrow, my time, and that happens to be the 2nd of November. So what is important about the 2nd of November? His Majesty's government, I'm going to quote a document, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. That's known as the Balfour Declaration of the 2nd of November, 1917.
Mm-hmm.
And when this declaration was put out, in fact, you and I have been in Israel during this time quite often. We would have been overseas for this anniversary again this year, had things not gone the way they did. But it's very important that people understand that if you read the documents, everything was done on the up and up. It's not as if, in fact, this book contains quotes from Arab leaders who welcomed the Jewish people and said there's plenty of room. I mean, yeah, it's come on in. So it's not that the way that the propaganda machine would present things, that's not the way it went down. So I just wanted to mention the Balfour Declaration.
Absolutely.
At this time, yeah.
And this brings us up to 1948, and we all know what happened then. And that is the 70 years between 1878 and 1948. It's interesting. Going forward another 70 years, we arrive at just talking about what we're talking about. We arrive at 2018, and 2018 was the first time that a British royal, visited Israel in an official capacity. That was Prince William. We
were there. I have video. Yeah, I have video of Prince William driving down right by Jaffa Gate. Hey, look, I'm sorry, I got to jump in again on this idea of 1948.
I remember that
another
now.
bit.
Sorry, I just remembered that video that you took. No, that's okay. So keep going.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so 1948, when Israel, the Declaration of Independence is read, we've heard this speech. Many of us, you can Google it, you can listen to it. So the next day, all the Arab nations of the world declare war on Israel. It's called the War of Independence. And Israel finds itself in its birthing moment as a modern nation, recognized within minutes by the United States, thank God, but with just immediately, every Arab nation surrounding Israel seeks its demise, seeks to destroy it off the face of the earth, and there is this major battle. Following that, the reason I bring that up, that in of itself is worth a major discussion and study, but just telling people that right after this, Jews were how do you say it? I started to say exiled. No, they were sent forth, kicked out of Arab countries. Let me tell you about this. In this book, from time immemorial, let me just give you a couple of stats here.
Please.
On the number of exiles. Now, I know that this is, I don't expect people to memorize this. We're not going to do a test, but listen to this. Jewish people were living all over the Arab world prior to 1948. In Iraq, there were an estimated 125 to 135,000. By 1980s, this is when this book came out, down to an estimated 200. 200 Jews. Now, we're talking about Judenrein. They're trying to get all the Jews out. Egypt had 75,000, less than 250 Jews living at the time of the 80s. Syria, 30,000, down to less than 4,000 by the 80s. Yemen, 55,000. Yemen and Aden, which is south of Yemen, 1,200 by the 80s. And listen to this. Now there are no Jews left in Yemen. What happened? What happened was this. Now, what the propagandists would have you believe is that these usurping Jewish Zionists went to the land because the colonial governments of the world coming out of the war made them a homeland and took that homeland from the inhabitants, the native inhabitants of the land, the Palestinians. This is the narrative, and they kicked them out. So what I find so interesting is that what they often will say is that during the War of Independence, the Jewish people sent all the Arabs out. But that's not what happened. In fact, there's plenty to document this. But if you want to talk about the refugees, what about all the Jews who were kicked out of their homes? No one typically brings that up. In fact, the question of refugees is Joan Peters' main question in the book From Time Immemorial. So anyway, I just wanted to bring up that all of these Arab countries surrounding Israel wanted to kill
I've got some stats
and
in front of me
destroy.
if you'd like to hear. These are just a little bit more recent. What I have in front of me is Egypt, 1948, 75,000 Jews, present 40. In Iraq, 1948, 150,000 Jews, present 7. In Algeria, 140,000, now 50. In Yemen, 55,000, now 50. I wouldn't want to be those guys in Yemen.
No,
in Lebanon,
where are your stats from? Because that's what I was just going through. Is it from the same source?
Actually, I'll see if I can share this on the Lebanon, 20,000, presently 100. Syria, 40,000, presently 0. Let me see here. Libya, 38,000, presently 0. Morocco, 265,000, now 2,000. Tunisia, 105,000, now 1,500.
So slightly different numbers than the list I just read. But the bottom line is
representative of your point, yeah.
Yeah, all of these nations basically chased the Jews out.
Chase them out.
So they didn't want them to live in the nations that they lived in. They forced them out. Where are they going to naturally go? They're absorbed by the fledgling Jewish state who miraculously fended off its enemy neighbors and survived. And so the Jewish nation, the state of Israel, accepted in and brought them into their society and made a way for them. Now, in the meantime, also against the propaganda machine, Israel is open in the sense that Arabs who live there, whether a person is Jewish, Christian, Muslim, they're all protected. Their rights are protected. But one thing that is certain is that is not reciprocated. So Jews are not allowed in these Arab places. It's very dangerous quite often for them to even travel to these places.
Can I, with that, everything that we've just gone through, I wonder if I can ask you a question. I'm interested in your thoughts on this, and because it has to do with the prophecy in the book of Jeremiah, which you've recently just gone through in your Saturday morning classes. Is that okay?
Sure, I'll try. Give it a shot.
This is, let me change my glasses here. Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 14 and on. And I guess I'll read it from this translation here. Assuredly a time is coming, declares the Lord, when it shall no longer be said, as the Lord lives who brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, but rather, as the Lord lives who brought the Israelites out of the northland, out of all the lands to which he had banished them. For I will bring them back to their land, which I gave to their fathers. Lo, I am sending for many fishermen, declares the Lord, and they shall haul them out. And after that, I will send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them. Out of every mountain, out of every hill, out of the clefts and the rocks, for my eyes are on their ways. They are not hidden from my presence, and it goes on. But what's your understanding of that, Ross, when you touched on this chapter?
No, I love Jeremiah. As you said, I just did a major 25-part series study on it. But Jeremiah 16, verses 14 through 16, the first part of that passage is repeated in Jeremiah 23, verse 7 and 8. But what you just hit on, this latter part of that, which deals with a fishing phase and a hunting phase, It is very interesting. Now, my thoughts on that, imagine, at least as I think about it, fishing, there is a trying to put the nets out and bring in. I've thought of that as a call that goes forth, like come back to the land, sort of a more of a peaceful, but the hunting seems to be who are the hunters? I tend
Mm,
to think of these as situations brought on by the bad ones who force Jews
mm.
or force Israelites to go back to the land. Is that what you're thinking, or you
Well,
have a different view on that?
that's how I understand it too, or at least that's the way that it comes across to me as well. And looking, and the reason why I bring that up is because looking at the history that we've just gone through, first you have the 100-year Jewish emancipation period, going
Yeah,
into the first Aliyah, and so on and so forth, and then all of a sudden you have this massive rise, exponential rise of anti-Semitism, culminating at the time into Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. And clearly, it hasn't stopped. I mean, we only need to switch on the television and look at the news and to see what is happening now.
yeah,
These are the hunters. Surely these are the hunters, Ross.
yeah.
And it is, I'm going to say, motivating Jews to return the land. They're undoubtedly, and thanks to again to Tamar Yono. If you haven't been checking out her videos, you need to do that. She's sharing on Facebook Live. So if you're on Facebook, look up Tamar Yono, and one of her most recent videos is regarding Aliyah, and she's saying, yes, right now this is a hot place to be, but it's going to be the safest place to be for Jews. And she outlines the reason why she says that. And I really am compelled by it. I think she's
Look,
right. And if we look at
let me
history, go
say
ahead.
this. Yeah, let me say this. Open your Bibles to Second Chronicles 36.
Hmm.
I was surprised. I listened to Tamar Yona as well. This Saturday, I gave the same call. So in my recent class, so 2 weeks ago, I taught a class that covered who does Israel belong to, and I went through all the not all, but most of the biblical texts, which say that the people, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this is their land. In other words, that when people want to say, well, this belongs to the Palestinians, this belongs to Israel. Look, God gave land to other descendants of Abraham, that you could say this land is Arab land if you want. But as far as the children of Israel, what land belongs to them? It's covered in Numbers chapter 34, Joshua chapter 15, and Ezekiel chapter 47. There is no division of that land,
Hmm.
at least from a biblical perspective. But then this past Saturday, I did a class called Ascending Jacob's Ladder, and I touched on
Hmm.
the subject of Aliyah. And if you look at verse 22 of Second Chronicles 36,
Hmm.
and in the first year of King Cyrus, I'm reading the JPS of
Yeah,
Persia,
I got it.
not the JPS of Persia. I'm reading the JPS, King
Uh,
Cyrus of Persia.
yeah.
When the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, speaking of Jeremiah, it's
Hmm.
Jeremiah 25, verse 11, Jeremiah chapter 29 and verse 10.
Okay, you're back. You're back. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah. So
All right.
you were reading from verse 22.
Yep.
In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, when the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah that we were just talking about was fulfilled, the Lord roused the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia to issue a
Yep.
proclamation throughout his realm by word of mouth and in writing as follows. Go
Yep.
ahead.
Yep. So thus said King Cyrus of Persia, the Lord God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, has charged me with building him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Any one of you, of all his people, the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. And
Hmm.
this is the root
Well,
ideas of Aliyah.
mhm.
So now this is the end of the Hebrew Bible. We also have this same passage appears in Ezra chapter 1, the first couple of verses of Ezra. So I think, and I made this point this past Saturday, the idea that we get is that the Bible, think about this, 929 chapters in the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible ends with a call for the people who are of God to go back. And what I find interesting, and maybe I'm stretching things a little bit, sensationalizing, but if you think about it, Isaiah 44:28 through Isaiah 45, the first few verses, it is talking about, God is talking about a person, Cyrus, in fact, Koresh, who is a Persian, and he calls him his Messiah. He says, God calls Cyrus the Persian his Messiah. And so I put the point this weekend this way. This is a messianic call for all of those who are God's people to go back to the land. Now, one of the things that's interesting, you brought us through some of the early part of this discussion tonight. You brought us through the various waves. A lot of these waves were inspired by a messianic expectation, a fervor among the people who felt like, whether they're right or not, they feel in their dispersed position, we need to go back to the land. And Jono, I feel like, I'm not much on feelings. I'm sort of a fact guy. I'm sort of a text guy. But there are so many texts. I went through probably 50 or so a couple of weeks ago. There are so many texts which say that God's going to bring his people back to the land. You can't avoid the fact that that this is so essential to the unfolding redemptive process. I mean, how many texts? There are dozens.
Yeah. As I often say, one would certainly be forgiven for speculating that this is a fulfillment of prophecy. No doubt, well, we know that people that are returning to Israel feel the same way. Many people return for that very reason, that the Jews come back. One such prophecy, and this brings me back to 1878. Shall I go there now?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
I just want to save time to talk about the current events. So hit it.
Just if you allow me to be a little sensational and a little bit, I'd like to talk about what I think are compelling coincidences, and that is in regards to the Moses Scroll and these prophecies, particularly Micah chapter 4, if I may. So Micah chapter 4 says, it kicks off saying, "And it will come about in the last days, in the latter days, if you like, that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of mountains, and it will be raised above the hills, and the peoples will stream to it, and many nations will come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob, so that he may teach us about his ways, and that we may walk in his paths.' Because," Ross, it says, "that from Zion will go forth the Torah and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And on that day, declares the Lord, I will assemble," it goes on to say in verse 6, "on that day I will assemble those who limp and gather the scattered, and those who I have afflicted. I will make those who limp a remnant, and those who have strayed a mighty nation." Okay? "And the Lord will reign over them on Mount Zion from now on and forever." So I remember thinking, a couple of years ago when we were first studying the Moses Scroll, and I was really getting into it, and this pops into my head, and I thought, well, if I give the Moses Scroll the benefit of the doubt, and let's say, we believe, let's give it the benefit of the doubt and say it is an authentic document, and it is the original document on which, all of our Tanakh is springboards from, platforms from. That being the case, then this passage must be talking about that document, if this document is what it claims to be. And so then I thought to myself, well, when did it first go out from Jerusalem? And I remember ringing you and we had a conversation about this. And I said, when did it first go? And you said, oh, well, you know that. It was in 1883. He took it to Leipzig, Germany, and then to London, and this, that, and the other. And I said, no, but wait. did it ever go out before that? He said, no, you said he put it in a Jerusalem bank vault for 5 years. You know this. And I'm thinking, yeah, I do know that, but did it ever go out before? And you said, oh yeah, well, I mean, Shapiro made a copy as best he could of the document,
Yeah.
trying to read it, and he sent it to Schlotman. I said, what year was that? And you said, that was in 1878.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
And I was really struck by that. And the reason why is because I wanted to see, when did people en masse start to return to, when did God start gathering the people back into the land in order to make a mighty nation? And as I already established, it was in July 1878 was when they purchased the land for Petah Tikva. A European Jewry did that so that they could come and work the land. So Petah Tikva, I mean, it's an interesting thing. It means door of hope, or opening of hope, and it's a phrase derived from the book of Hosea, chapter 2, verse 14 to 15, or 16 to 17, I think, in the Hebrew, which says, "Therefore, behold, I, God, am going to persuade her, Israel, to bring her into the wilderness and speak kindly to her, and then I will give her her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor is the door of hope," as Petah Tikva. Mm-hmm. And she will respond there, as in the days of her youth, as in the day when she went up from the land of Egypt. And in this passage, God likens himself as a husband who brings back his wife Israel, who will respond faithfully in the days of her youth. And the husband, God, will provide via fertility of the land and so on and so forth. And he's certainly done that. I mean, the agricultural, the amount that Israel produces is staggering for the size of the country. So Petah Tikva was a fitting name for a community founded in 1878 by Jewish pioneers from Europe, and it was the first modern Jewish. It was the first modern Jewish agricultural community in what would eventually become known, obviously, as the State of Israel. And as I mentioned, that's 70 years later. And so Petah Tikva is also known as Mother of the Moshavot. By the way, I did mention that Rosh Pinah was established in 1878 as well. Gaoni, I think it was originally called by local Jews from Sfat primarily, but it was abandoned. And in 1882, 30 families who had immigrated from Romania re-established that settlement as a moshav and called it Rosh Pinah.
And people may not know, not everyone may know what a moshav is, but you're talking about you can explain it, but you use the term. I don't know if everyone knows that it's like a community, a town.
A moshav is like a farming community, as opposed to a kibbutz, which is more of a little socialist community. This farming community of a moshav is more a little more capitalist, if you like. Everyone has their own individual farms, and that's what they were doing there. In 1878, the founders of Petah Tikva learned of the availability of this land northeast of Java, and the land was owned by two Christian businessmen from Jaffa, rather. And the initial purchase was in July 30th. Actually, we even know the day, July 30th, 1878. So I find this really interesting, and I think that it is compelling. I think that it's coincidental. And more than that, Rosh Pinah and Petah Tikva were stagnated by malaria, which seems to coincide with Shapiro. Schlotman wrote back to Shapiro and he said, "How dare you even suggest that something like this would be authentic when it contradicts what it says in our Bible, in our in our canonical text? How dare you even do?" Which sort of scared Shapiro back into his shell somewhat, which is the reason why he put it in a bank vault in Jerusalem for 5 years. So even his attempt to bring this out to the world was stagnated, just as Rosh Pinah and Petah Tikva were also stagnated by malaria, and it was these communities were abandoned for a time, and it wasn't until 1882 that they started to come back and with additional funding and so on and so forth. But it was in 1882, by the way, Ross, where Shapiro began reading a book by a book published in you there?
Yeah.
In 1860 by Frederick Bleek, right? Entitled Introduction to the Old Testament. And Bleek's book outlined, if you like, something akin to the documentary hypothesis, where he said that one contributor to the Torah might have been the Elohist, the person who refers to God as Elohim, And Shapiro was reading this, and he said, "Well, I've got an Elohist document. This is absolutely this has to be authentic." And so, with newfound motivation, that's when he took it out in 1883 and went to the world with it, and the rest is history.
It is interesting that on the heels of these key dates, it's almost as something happened. Something happened, and there are historical things that we can point to, but again, a lot of these texts begin to very literally become fulfilled. Judah goes back to the land. We have several verses in their historical setting. If you read them, we can get the idea that Judah would be in the land before the other tribes would join them, whoever those other tribes are. But the idea is very, very interesting, because what began to happen before this date, before the Jewish people began to return, before people like Charles Taze Russell and some of these Zionists began to read the Bible very literally. I've mentioned this before, but there were hymns in songbooks in churches that talked about Christians going on streets of gold in Beulah land. That's talking about heaven, Jono. That's not talking about literal Jews going back to a literal land. But then people began to say, wait a minute, I think these prophecies, if we read the Bible and let the Bible be the Bible, let Israel mean Israel, let Jerusalem mean Jerusalem, let the land of promise be the land of promise and not some great by and by in the sky. I think that's what begins to happen. And ultimately, something takes place. It's not magic. Well, you're suggesting that it is at least an interesting...
At least very coincidental, and I find somewhat compelling. Now, the thing about it is that in between these two prophecies that I read the beginning of Micah chapter 4 and then from verse 6 on, there's a section that hasn't happened yet, and that section says in verse 3, "Thus God, Elohim, will judge among many peoples and arbitrate for the multitude of nations, however distant, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not take up sword against nation. They shall never know again war." Clearly that has not happened, but it did get me thinking at the time. And I thought, if all of this is to happen within the same period of time, if you like because it says in that day, and how does one measure in that day?
Yeah.
If we give again this prophecy the benefit of the doubt, if we give the Moses scroll the benefit of the doubt, and looking back on how this has worked historically, I wondered, how would such a thing occur?
Yeah.
And knowing that at least half the world's Jewry is still in the States or abroad, and almost half is now in the state of Israel, it concerned me greatly that there might be another wave of hunters. And you and I talked about this a couple of years ago, that there might be another unprecedented wave of hunters that would motivate Jews to return to the land, and therefore it would be throughout the world, everywhere that they have been scattered, which is, what God says in that He would regather them from everywhere that He's scattered them in Jeremiah chapter 16. And even though I speculated on that with you back then, I'm still shocked, thoroughly shocked, at the amount of at the rise of anti-Semitism around the world, blatant, parading of
Oh yeah.
anti-Semitism and Jew hatred around the world as a result, even though in the undeniable facts of the brutality and barbarism that Hamas inflicted upon Israel, people are still coming out to defend them. You would never have seen this coming. This is just unbelievable.
It has derailed everything that I had on a planner for the past since October the 7th.
Mm,
From teaching Hebrew every week, I mean, it's every Saturday I'm still going live and still sharing a message, but those messages are not what I had planned prior to October the 7th. And you're right, it is off the charts.
mm,
It's a steep climb in anti-Semitism that is, I mean, from in Russia, people are storming an airport, ripping the air, like destroying it to get to a plane that has Jews on it
mm,
to kill.
mm,
People are threatening, and it's just I would not have seen it. But I tell you,
mm,
it's why this past Saturday I did make that statement, and I'm telling you, it's I haven't heard a voice, I haven't seen a bush
mm,
burning in my yard, but I would at least seriously consider Aliyah as an option for security. I mean, we've heard not only Tamar Yona, people go, well, there's war going on right now. Would I make Aliyah now? Well, I tell you what, it's not very far from being, it's dangerous now for Jewish people in a lot of places. We're seeing liberal Jews, Mayim Bialik, who, as I understand, I don't follow people who are Hollywood people or anything, but what I gathered from reading, normally she's very, very liberal in her views and is not like a Zionist type, but she's shocked at that her child who's thinking of going to college now has to be worried that they
mm,
can go to college and not be injured or harassed or
mm,
whatever. And we've heard Tamar Yona and other of our friends, Gershon, our tour guide, who
mm.
said, listen, it's not going to be safe in the diaspora. One thing that really struck me about Tamar, she said, you realize that the diaspora, the exile, is a curse. Stop living in the curse. Come back to
So
the
tell us,
land. That really hit me.
yeah, tell us more about that. What is the command to make Aliyah? What is the command to live in the land? What is the I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's the same in the Moses scroll, isn't it? Where it talks about the curses. I'll find that. You keep going.
Yeah, no, I mean, the main point I wanted to make is that when she said that, that you will be kicked out of the land. See, one of the things that is very clear, and the last two, I keep going back to the last two classes I taught 2 consecutive Saturdays. People
Mm,
have to listen to those to get all of these texts. But God tells Israel that I'm bringing you into this land not because of your righteousness. It's gifted, my love for your fathers, and it's basically the reason that he brings them into the land is because he's going to fulfill this promise, but it's also because the previous inhabitants to the land were so wicked that it literally the land vomited them out. So the fact that they're cursed, you will be cursed. And, if you read Leviticus, what is it, 26, 27,
mhm.
Deuteronomy 28, 29, you're going to get some of this where part of that curse is to be exiled to the farthest
Yeah,
ends of heaven.
and this is what it says in the Moses scroll: "You will be cursed when you come in; you will be cursed when you go out. Your Elohim will," and this is as a result of not observing the 10 words. The Elohim will give you to be smitten before your enemies. Elohim will send the curses against all the work of your hands. Elohim will make you a horror, a proverb, an insult among all the people of the earth. Elohim will restrain the heavens. The stranger in your midst will ascend higher, and you will descend lower beneath. He will lend to you, you will not lend to him. Elohim will cause you to perish, and he will destroy you upon the face of the ground that you are going there to possess it. Which is exactly what happens. So in light of those curses, then yes, being in the diaspora is a curse.
Yep.
The
But
solution is, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, but the promise is that God will bring them back. In fact, in Jeremiah, going back to Jeremiah, my favorite book, chapter 32, verse 37 through 41, one of the things that we get in verse 41, God says that with all his heart and all his soul, it's the one thing God will do with all his heart and soul is he says, I will bring you back to this land, to this place, this land, physical land. You, the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I'll bring you back to this land. And that began, I believe, to happen with these various waves. He's bringing them back. You know, some of it, Jeremiah chapter 3, I think it's verse 18, where it talks, or a little bit prior, probably verse 16, 17, where it says that one from a two from a family. You know, it's a trickle in effect. There's a fishing where a larger group, and then maybe we're thinking right that there is a hunting phase where people are just like on the outside of the Declaration of Israel's independence in 48, where you had thousands of people pushed out of their homes in various Arab nations. Could that happen? I want to say that it couldn't, but let me tell you, the world we live in, if you look at the news, look what's happening. I mean, it is becoming vicious. And let me tell you, just this last couple of days, Yemen, the Houthis, I didn't know much about the Houthis, but now I understand that the Houthis have declared, they're from Yemen, have declared war on Israel, taking sides with the Palestinians. They've already made 3 attempts. Their rockets have been shot down. Their drones have been shot down. But they are in bed with Iran. So you've got the Houthis in the south. You've got Hezbollah in the north. They're threatening, and they're actually sending rockets over. Who's next? Who's coming in? There's saber rattling going on around the world. There are marches in universities. College kids don't feel safe. I think you told me it's happening also in Australia. In Sydney, there are marches.
Oh, it's shocking.
It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it really is. And how much do you think this is as a result of the Abraham Accords? I mean, this is one of the most spectacular achievements of the previous administration. Was driving this forward. It's do you feel that Iran is and its proxies are feeling threatened? Do you have it there? Yeah. What's your feeling on that?
That is one of the views. The Peace to Prosperity Plan. You can, by the way, read this. Those who haven't, you and I have read it because we did shows on it. But this Abraham Accords, it really, the effects of it, the positive effects of it, are still being felt even today, and some of it is still coming to pass. Despite those who hate the fact that Israel is working with any of its neighbors. One of the things that's important, though, directly to your question, I do think that Saudi was on the verge of normalizing ties with Israel. Everyone knew that. It was public. Some have speculated. I don't know. I'm not an expert on Middle East policy or anything. But some have speculated that this attack now, 50 years on the heels of the 1973 war of Yom Kippur, that this was sort of an all-out ditch effort to get everybody off of that relationship. Now, remember, Saudi Arabia, against Saudi is Iran. These are different branches of Islam. Not only that, but they're enemies. And the Houthis of Yemen are against Saudi Arabia. So the enemy of the enemy is the enemy of the, how does that saying go? It seems to be dividing. You have an axis of evil almost. There is a line in the sand that I think was drawn almost on October the 7th. I know for me, my life has been different. I on my desk, I can't even pick everything up because I'm working to try to understand who the players are. I don't understand all of it yet, but I'm certainly trying to increase my knowledge. But again, Arab nations are saber rattling and so forth, and it's really, really bad.
And Doug just said, is Hamas Shiite? Hamas is certainly an Iranian proxy. There's no doubt about that, and they are funding this whole and masterminding this whole situation. I don't pretend to know the Shiite Sunni division. Ross, yeah.
No, I think what we'll do though is we've gone for about an hour. Maybe we've got time for a couple of call-ins.
Let's do it.
And maybe some people have some insights. We've kind of laid out, just a general idea. You've come up with some interesting connections with the Moses Scroll. Look, one other thing that I'll say, and then maybe we've got some callers that might want to have a little bit of time on the mic. I think a lot of us are in prayer, but we ought to be vigilant. We ought to really be watching. And I think Jewish people of Israel who are among the nations, I know we're right in the middle of a war right now. So people are saying, I don't know. I mean, well, should I go right this minute? I think I would be working on a plan, maybe not this week, maybe not next week, but it's not just an immediate process.
Yeah, but hypothesize. I mean, if things continue to spiral out of control, and in some areas we're talking about anti-Semitism that has increased, by 1,000%, and I'm not exaggerating, it would serve you well to entertain a plan, at least. Entertain a plan. What would that look like and how would it work? At least entertain the plan.
You watch for people to raise their hand. I just want to hit a couple of points from this article. To your point,
Go ahead.
This is an article that appeared in Reuters. How the surge in anti-Semitism is affecting countries around the world. It's Reuters. How do you say Reuters?
Yeah.
Reuters. There you go. That's right. I'd never heard it said before. Okay, here you go. United States Jewish advocacy. Anti-Semitic incidents have risen about 400% in the 2 weeks following October 7th. 400%. These are reported now. Remember, the spokesperson for the White House, Ms. Jean-Pierre, was asked, is the administration concerned about a rise in anti-Semitism? And remember what she said? I tell you what we are concerned with. We're concerned with Islamophobia, and she just totally took a different turn. What in the world?
An unbelievable level, is it not? It is unbelievable.
And I'm thankful that to this point, the U.S. has supported Israel in a good, strong way. But let me tell you, even today, to that point, the administration issued a concern over what? Over Jewish students being harassed on campuses and threatened. It was on Islamophobia. And I tell you, a lot of people are fed up. A lot of people are at the place where we're saying, by God, let's just, the line is in the sand. You're going to support Israel or you're not going to support Israel. We see it all over the world now. I think people are fed up. Okay, here you go. Let me hit this. Sorry. Let's see. This is under the U.S. There are a couple of instances that were mentioned. One, a man screaming, "Free Palestine and kill the Jews," attempted to break into a Jewish family's home in Los Angeles. That's just one little case. Okay, Canada. Notes Justin Trudeau spoke on the 17th of a scary rise in anti-Semitism, citing incidents in a Jewish school. Argentina says, scarred by 2 attacks in the 90s, they're really worried about this. A well-known Jewish school in Buenos Aires asked pupils not to wear their usual uniforms while some teams pulled out of a table tennis competition being held at a Jewish club for fear it could be
By the
targeted.
way, yeah, and by the way, this is a backward way of going about it. Instead of saying, "Hey, let's deploy the military, let's deploy the riot police to protect the Jews," they're saying to the Jews, "Hey, don't show up to this area, or maybe stay indoors and don't come out and
Yeah,
protest." It's
put
all
a hat over, cover
yeah,
your kippah.
don't look so Jewish, and all of this. What they should be doing is arming up to protect the citizens, and and thoroughly dealing with those who are supporting the terrorism and engaging in the anti-Semitism. The fact that we have a press and politics that aren't doing their job properly and are feeding into this is certainly, again, a motivation for, and I mentioned the Dreyfus Affair earlier, I mean, it's worth reading, but is a motivation for at least considering what Aliyah may look like if you are eligible to make Aliyah. It's alarming. All around the world, it is just incredibly alarming. And every day that we turn on the news and our trusted sources, and by the way, I'm going to say it again, I think Ben Shapiro is doing an exceptional job covering this topic every single day. Tamar Yona, Ben Shapiro, you can't go wrong. And I say that because whenever I mention Ben Shapiro, it upsets people, and they're all the right people that I want to upset. So
I'm with you. Amen.
By all
and
means,
I'm telling you, not only that, but you can follow David Friedman on Twitter. He is knocking it out of the park. People are fed up. People are fed up with this woke. I don't know. I started to call it what it really is, but this woke stuff. People are fed up. They're tired of listening to it. And by God, it's time for people to stand up. Let me tell you this thing about the Houthis. This is one thing I found today. The Houthis were placed on a foreign terrorist organization list in the last days of the Trump administration.
And rightfully so.
Rightly so. Immediately upon the new administration, the Biden administration, that was one of the things that was overturned because the previous administration, they felt, had been so unfair to people of whatever. So they reinstated, they said, no, we have to give the Houthis a chance, and they're not on the terrorist watch list anymore. Let's take them off. And let's take them off because of humanitarian. Sound familiar? Guess what else? Same thing goes with all of the money that was being funneled for God knows how long to the Palestinian Authority under various names, but Mahmoud Abbas and that group and all the rich people have been...
And the aid to Gaza. I mean, I was just reading this morning how Israel released proof that Hamas is stealing fuel from the citizens and from the hospitals. I mean, all aid that makes it in eventually finds its way to Hamas. They know that it happens, and they are funding terrorism. This current administration has
it's not just in America. It's a lot of these countries. Europe is implicit in this as well. It's like it's under the, and maybe some of it. You might say some of it is, we don't want people to, we need to give them some money for whatever. But these groups, I mean, look, hundreds of millions of dollars have been released that was formerly on hold by the U.S. administration. By the current administration, the Biden administration released all those funds and sent them hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, what do we think they built with that? Did they build schools? No. Did they help the Palestinians? No. What did they do? They used the money to buy rockets and plan this evil attack. That's what happened. My God. I mean, look, but people are tired of it. They really are. People who said, we've never talked about this kind of stuff. I'd prefer to just open up my Bible and read Psalms and tell, this is what this means in the Hebrew. That's a whole lot more fun than this. But I can tell you one thing I won't do. I won't be on the wrong side of history here. I will not
That's
side
right.
with the enemies of Israel. I
Mhm.
will not. I
Yep.
will not turn yellow
Mm.
and try to appease a group of people that I don't want to be friends with anyway.
Mhm.
If somebody
Mhm.
hates Israel and they don't believe in God and they don't care about, that I don't want to hang out with somebody like that. I don't
If
care if they hate me.
if they won't, at the very least, even condemn the terrorist activity that the barbarism that Hamas inflicted upon Israel, if they will not even condemn that, I don't want to. I don't want to hear or see them ever
Yeah,
again. I am.
yeah.
It really is, and this is the polarizing situation that we find ourselves in. And it's right that we should find ourselves in this situation. We need to distance ourselves from people who will not condemn these acts, and we need
Let
to
me let me
stand
yeah, I'm
alongside of
sorry. I
Israel. Go
didn't
ahead.
yeah. Let me give you just for the US. I don't know what all kind
Mm.
of rules you have there, but we have a law on the books called the Taylor Force Act. The
Mm.
Taylor Force. People can look this up. Taylor
Yep.
Force, American citizen that was killed, right?
And
And
again, this is
here's
something else that the Trump administration
That's right.
brought in.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. It prohibits the U.S., prohibits, Jono, the U.S.,
Mm.
from providing direct economic aid to the Palestinian Authority until it stops payments to families of Palestinians who commit violence against Israel or Americans. So if as long as the Palestinian Authority is honoring a suicide bomber or whatever that blows up Jews or tries to kill Jews or that launches a
Mm.
terrorist attack, it goes to prison, dies, whatever. The money, and they're naming schools after people like this. This plan, the Peace to Prosperity, called the Abraham Accords. One of the things
Mm.
that's interesting about it is most people haven't read it. Like if they don't like Trump, which I don't care what people think about who in the political world, but because most people say it's got Trump's name attached to it, I don't want anything to do with it. Well, that's just silly. People ought to read this because one of the things that it says is if the Palestinians ever expect to get any recognition or any money, they have to stop the pay for slay deal. And the Taylor
You
Act
know
is
what?
part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just reminded me when you said when you brought up the Taylor Force Act, I thought, I wonder what year that is. And lo and behold, the act was signed into law by Trump on the 23rd of March, 2018. A lot of
That's right.
significant things happened in you know, I know it
The
sounds
moving of
sensational.
the embassy. The moving of the
The moving in
embassy,
the embassy
you
was
know?
2018. That's right.
Yep.
It absolutely
Yep.
was. And of
And
course,
look,
November, and we were there. There was the Gaza clashes that started on
yep.
the 11th of November in 2018. Um, they discovered. You
Administration.
remember this? They discovered the Hamas tunnels at
Yep.
Metula. And we had just been there. They discovered them only days after we had left Metula, right up in the north bordering with Lebanon, the Hezbollah tunnels, I should say. And of course, Israel announced its departure from UNESCO, citing bias. I mean, everybody should just
Look,
ditch
look,
the UN altogether. Go ahead.
the Palestinian Authority's Martyr Fund, Trump administration shut down funding 23 March 2018, cut $200 million that was going to the PA because it's this easy. They just said, just stop naming gymnasiums after people who killed Jews. Quit
What's
honoring
that?
martyrs. Quit teaching your children to kill Jews in kindergarten, for God's sake, and we'll
Mm,
give you some money. They said no, it's not. We're not going to do that.
mm,
We have to honor our martyrs. So cut 300 million, 200 million. Also cut the United Nations UNRWA 300 million.
mhm.
And by 2019, the U.S. had stopped all U.S. aid to the Palestinian West Bank and Gaza under the current leadership, which would not stop honoring the killing of Jews. And then that administration left, and then another said, "Let me write you a check." And that's what happened. So we start pouring hundreds of millions of dollars back in. It's not just the U.S. So
Mm.
look, I am so thankful, so thankful that the U.S. said, hey, we're going to help Israel. But I hope to God that Israel does not stop until they have eliminated Hamas. I hope that the U.S. is not guilty, not only of giving hundreds of millions of dollars to these terrorist groups, but I hope that the U.S. government doesn't wrongly pressure Israel to stop short of making sure that their people are safe. That's what I hope. I hope
Good.
that, you know,
I'm
and
with you.
man,
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
we're only a few minutes from finishing up, and we'd love to hear from those in the studio audience right now. If there's anything that you would like to vent, anything you'd like to say, any questions that you might have about anything that was spoken about today, now is the time to raise your hand. But it has been pretty comprehensive, I think, Ross.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground. And thanks for all your research on the waves of Aliyah. I will say that, you know, I'm trying, like you mentioned, it's hard to go back with everything that's going on in the world, and now two countries and other countries are, we got Hezbollah in the north, we have all these things going on. So it's hard to just say, hey, let's go back to our regular teaching cycle. So this week, as I come into preparing for Saturday's class, my inclination for my class this Saturday has something to do with putting the fear of God on Israel's enemies. You know,
Okay.
how many passages do we have? And I've actually thought of this a little bit differently in the past. But one of the things that I see quite often in the text is the nations surrounding will fear Israel. You know, and we look at that and we go, we don't like the way that's worded. Well, let me tell you.
Part of the blessings, though, isn't it? As a result of,
I was going to say, it's not
of the
only
obedience.
it's in the Moses scroll, but it's also, it is quite well represented in the Hebrew Bible. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to work on is put the fear of God in people surrounding Israel. Or you might say it another way. I don't know if I'll do this, but scare the hell out of them or put the fear of God in them. Both go together. I think that's
You will be
what needs
blessed
to
when you
happen.
come in. You will be blessed when you go out. Your Elohim will give you your enemies, smiting them before you. Elohim will command the blessing in all that your hands do. Elohim will establish you as a sanctified people for himself, and all the people of the earth will see it, and they will be in awe of you.
That's right.
And you know, may it be. And again, the observance of the 10 words is what brings us about. We don't have any hands up, Ross.
I know it. That's okay. Maybe they're just being bashful. But I tell you this. Here's the thing. We're going to use more and more. We're going to use this this platform, the Discord. We had an attack on Saturday. I told you about it. Our people heard about this. An enemy, whoever the enemy was, they named themselves the CCP. You've been hacked by the CCP. I don't know. But anyway, it was not acceptable.
They put a video of someone loving a watermelon in a very special way.
They did. And that is a strange image. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can't unsee, that being one of them.
You just add that to the list of things you've witnessed. But it does go to showing why this is necessary. If you'd like to be part of the studio audience and be part of what we're doing here, we have to do it like this so that it's safe. And how can people be a part of this, Ross?
Well, we'll get to that, but we have Josh Chisholm. How are you doing, Joshua?
Hey,
what
Josh.
you got for us, brother? Wait, did I get it?
Okay, I got it. Yep.
There you go.
All right, go ahead, mate.
Yep.
We can hear you. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Wonderful. How are y'all doing?
Doing all right,
Wonderful.
thank you, my friend.
Good deal. I think y'all have been very comprehensive this evening talking about the subject. I found myself the last 3 weeks thinking about this Aliyah for all the Jews around the world, because this, I feel the same way many of us do here in our group, that this is going to get worse. And I think it's interesting. I was talking to my wife about this a few days ago. The Jews have been plodding through 2,000 years of exile, and they've always had issues with the people that they had to live with. And it seems to me that something happened in the 20th century that started pointing them back towards the land. And regardless, I know that over time and over generations, people can become less religious or less faithful. And I think it's important for us to remember that Jews are just people, just like us. Sometimes they can lose heart or lose faith depending on their own personal circumstances, but regardless of their faith or religious situation, the fact that the world is starting to turn against them in this really disgusting and ugly way, I would want to encourage all of my Jewish friends to think about going home. That they have something special that we here in the United States don't have. They are a people, a singular, unified people with thousands of years of family history and tradition. And they've got a homeland that they can defend on principle and on history and on a religious point, to their last breath. And I feel the same way that Dave did earlier when he was talking about, he's ready to go fight. When I watched those images roll in that first night, when I started watching it all happen, I felt the same way. I hope that this is a wake-up call for not just the government in Israel, but also for everybody around the world. As we watch the news and we watch communities all around the world turn their hatred towards a people just because of their heritage, just because they exist. I think that we may find ourselves in the near future lending a helping hand in a more serious and direct way than I think we could even imagine right now.
Yeah. No, I agree. And again, I think we should stand against hate, no matter who the hated is. But right now, what we're witnessing is Jewish hate. Well, I saw a video. Many of you have seen this as well, where this New Yorker, this tough guy, seems to be pretty tough.
Saw that.
Looks tough. That's one of my favorite videos because this person is walking along, ripping down posters, which are about.
And there's a lot of these videos, aren't there? There's a lot of these videos of people ripping down the posters that are bringing to people's attention that there are hostages and even young people, babies, and so on and so forth. These hostages that have been taken by Hamas, and people are just pulling them down. Unbelievable.
And New York guy is my favorite so far. Watching him stand up to that guy made me proud to be an American.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to ask, Jono, since I've got you here, last week we had a discussion about, or I wasn't here last week. This is pretty late at night for me, guys. So
thanks for being with us this late.
I'm happy to be here. Jono had mentioned a set of scriptures about a group of men who refused to stand up and fight against the Amalekites, and that there was some indication that. Do you know what I'm talking about, Jono?
It might be referring to the commandment that God gave to Israel after Horeb, saying, "Now's the time to go and take the hill country of the Amorites." And they refused to go, and maybe I said Amalekites. I might have done that.
We were talking about Amalek, but
that's right.
I remember picking up on the fact that God told Moses, or maybe Joshua, that if these people refuse to get up and go fight like I've told them to, then they're going to be under a curse.
Yeah, that's right. And the reason why I brought this passage forward was because at the time I just wanted to show that the fighting men that refused to go were the ones that suffered the repercussions. So God said to them, you don't want to do what I've told you to do, even after I've just revealed to you the 10 words in such a spectacular way in the hearing of all the people, and now you think that I'm setting you up to kill you, that I hate you, that you're going to die at the hand of the Amorites. How about this? How about you just stay where you are? Stay where you are in Kadesh Barnea, where you feel, nice and safe, and just die there. And then once you're all dead, then your children can go and do what I tell them to do, and they will inherit that good land that I promised to their fathers. So my point with that at the time, go ahead.
Down through history. I said that whole idea seems to reverberate down through history from the moment he said it, and not just for the Jewish people either. It's for everybody who won't stand up and do the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'd agree with that. And it seems to be perhaps a form of retributive punishment that's worth having a look at and reading up on that. That may well be the case, and that sort of justice is something we certainly crave. It used to be that way, and it no longer is. Instead, we protect the criminals, which is why we have such a rise in anti-Semitism today. I think is because the law protects the criminals. It gives free speech to those who would tear that right to free speech down. It's we no longer have retributive justice
and abused. Absolutely.
Yeah, quite right.
So
good.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Jono. I've been thinking about it all week, and obviously I share y'all and everybody else's concern about the direction that this is going. If this conflict continues without resolution, people are going to have to start picking sides, and I think we all know.
Right.
Well, Lee, to your point, Lee brings up in the comments section, some say how we respond today is an example of what we would have done during the Nazi occupation. I don't know, as things were much different back then. Today, so far, we can speak up and still be protected by our government. So, but the point that a lot of people are making is, because that question comes up, well, I don't know what I would have done. And so the popular meme that's going around is, if you want to know how you would have done it, you're looking at now. I don't know, but I'm like Lee. I don't know if I know this is a good litmus test for that, but I do know this. I am not going to side against Israel. That doesn't mean that I look at the secular government of Israel and say that everything they do is perfectly right. But here you've got a clear-cut example that many people refuse to just, it's very, very clear.
Yeah.
And Israel not only has the right to defend itself, but the obligation to root out those which are seeking to destroy them. And I think that is something that Israel has committed to. And I would hope that people don't try to talk them off of that. I think that's the case. They need to keep going.
I'm with you, Karen.
Karen?
Welcome to the stage.
Hey, Karen, how are you?
Oh, good. I don't know if years ago I listened to I don't know what you would call it, like a testimony or something of this rabbi's story. His name is Alana Nava. He lives in Sfat, but he was lived in the United States. And he talks about how his grandmother a few years ago told him to liquidate his assets, take what was his, and move back to Israel, because she went through the Holocaust, and the United States was starting to look just like Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
A few years. So he went ahead and did it. But, there's some things that I see today that were common back then is businessmen, they're going to do what's best for business. If they think it's going to be more profitable to support the, Palestinians, then they're going to do that. That's what they did during the last World War. We have big American bankers and businessmen that supported Hitler's army. They financed Hitler's army because they thought it was better than communism. We're talking parents of presidents. But you can't call them Nazis, and you can't say that they were Hitler sympathizers, because it wasn't, it didn't have anything to do with that. It was just business. And I see that today. It's just
It's a real concern.
I'm not a Nazi. I'm not a whatever. I'm not a this sympathizer or I'm a that sympathizer. It's just business.
Yeah.
And
like I said at the beginning, they cannot, at the very
them.
least, condemn the actions of Hamas.
No, bad for business, so they won't.
Yeah. No.
Well, if you look at all war, to your point, all war is profitable, so certainly there is some of that going on. But I tell you, just like this person you bring up, this rabbi whose grandmother said you need to go back, I don't know, I don't have any prophetic insight here. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I'm saying from a very practical standpoint, I think that it's going to be very clear, very obvious, very soon that the safest place for Israelis to be, or Jews to be, is in the land of Israel. And there have been voices who've been saying this for quite some time. And I would encourage Jewish people to look at this situation very, very closely. I can't make a call for anybody. I'm not even Jewish. I can't go if I decided to make Aliyah right now.
Same.
But I tell you right now, if I were, or if I was Jewish, I would be looking at ways to, what does that process look like? What do I need to do to get my family
entertain
there?
the idea, and what would that look like, and what would need to be done? Just entertain the plan is the first step. We are just about to run out of time. Do you have any final thoughts, Ross?
I tell you, I hope that. Thanks, by the way, Karen, for your comments, and thanks, Joshua. And Dave commented earlier before we started recording, but he gave us some insight into some of his work. Look, we really appreciate people taking the time to join us on Wednesdays, and people can do that. The comments section of this video will tell you how you can be part of the live audience. This video will always, what we record on Wednesday night, will be put out on Thursday night, U.S., 8 p.m. Central. We'll put those out then. So if you're free on Thursday, even though you were here for the live show, if you can join us, we anticipate more and more people coming to these, and not all are friendly to Israel. So feel free to join us, and Jono and I will be there, and you can join us as well. The reason, one final point, we do it this way because of what we witnessed on Saturday. By doing it this way, it can't happen. So that's
you don't want any more images like what you.
I don't want any more of those. That's right. Hey, look,
you
Jono,
like watermelon, but not that much.
I don't know if I'll eat watermelon again. Hey, look, thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you very much for being part of what we do here. Pray for the people of Israel. Remember, November the 2nd is the anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, but there's a lot more we want you to think about. Pray for Israel. Israel is under attack. We've got right now, not only do they have enemies in the north, but we've got also the Houthis in the south firing rockets and so forth. So they've joined up. Who's going to be next? I don't know, but I'm praying that God will strengthen Israel and fight on their behalf. And look, if you can, join me Saturday morning, 10:30 a.m. Central Time, right here on Ross K. Nichols TV. We're going to talk about God defending Israel and putting the fear of God on the enemies of Israel.
Looking forward to that. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Hey, have a beautiful night.